My name is Christian Luper, and this is my Finance 451 presentation for Dr. John Cresson. A little overview for this project. Basically what we had to do was choose two different industries with 5 different companies in those industries and sort of compare the industries to each other. Basically through different ratio analysis, choose the best company from each industry and then compare those two to pick your one best stock. So for my first industry, I chose durable consumer goods, and the companies I chose were Apple, Canon, Sony, Mohawk Industries, and Whirlpool. So my first company is Apple. Just a little overview. It's a multinational technology company that designs, develops, and sells consumer electronics, computer software, online services, and personal computers. And it's also the largest company in the world. So I chose to focus mainly on liquidity ratios as well as ROE. ROE because it is the single most important ratio because it focuses on maximizing shareholder wealth, which is the entire goal of management. So for Apple, it actually had above average ratios for current cash and quick. The current ratio was 1.08, cash ratio was 0.4, and quick ratio was 0.67. This means that they're able to pay their creditors while being a profitable company for their shareholders and adding value to a stock portfolio. And they also had a price to earnings ratio of 16.31, which means you're investing $16.31 for every $1 in earnings, which is relatively average for this industry. Next we have Canon. It's a Japanese multinational corporation that specializes in the manufacturing of imaging and optical products, including cameras, camcorders, photocopiers, steppers, computers, printers, and medical equipment. They had a really high current ratio compared to the industry average. Their cash ratio and quick ratios were right on par with the average. Their current ratio was 2.6, cash ratio was 0.99, and their quick ratio was 1.67. Their PE ratio was a little bit higher than the industry average at 18.03, and the ROE was relatively low for my taste at 8.31. However, they are able to pay creditors while remaining profitable and adding value to a portfolio. Next we have Sony Corporation. It's a Japanese multinational conglomerate corporation who primarily focuses on the electronics, gaming, entertainment, and financial industry. Their current ratio, cash ratio, and quick ratio was relatively low compared to the industry average. Their current ratio was 0.88, their cash ratio was 0.39, and their quick ratio was 0.57. Their PE ratio is actually negative, which is very rare for a company this large. It was negative 33.65, which is absolutely terrible. Their ROE was negative 1.71. However, with their liquidity ratios, they are able to pay their creditors, but they're not a very profitable company when it comes to terms of like earning money off of an investment. So personally, I wouldn't add them to a portfolio. I don't think that it's a very valuable investment at this point in time, but maybe in the future it'll pick back up. Next we have Mohawk Industries. It's a flooring manufacturer that produces floor covering products for residential and commercial applications in North America and residential applications in Europe. Their current ratio was pretty high compared to the average for this industry. It was 1.6. Their cash ratio, however, was relatively low compared to the industry average at 0.05, and their quick ratio was 0.6. Their ROE was a little less than average at 10.87, and their PE was actually one of the lowest at 3.93. However, they are able to pay their creditors while remaining profitable and adding value to a portfolio. And then we have Whirlpool. It's an American multinational manufacturer and marketer of home applications, headquartered in Benton Charter Township, Michigan. They make a lot of your home appliances that you can find like Lowe's and Home Depot stores like that. All of their liquidity ratios are pretty much even with the industry average. Their current ratio was 0.88, cash ratio was 0.39, and their quick ratio was 0.57. Their ROE was relatively average as well at 12.97, and they actually had a pretty high price to earnings ratio of 20.71. So they are a very profitable company who is able to pay their creditors and provide a very valuable stock to shareholders. This is an industry analysis. It's just some averages from the 5 companies. The current ratio for the industry was 1.408. Quick ratio was 0.44 and the cash ratio was 0.86. The return on equity is 13.76. Price to earnings ratio was a little low for my taste at 5.06. As an entire industry, it is a very profitable industry. Most of the companies can pay their creditors while being valuable to shareholders. And my favorite company is Apple, and these are some reasons why. They have the largest market cap in the industry, the highest ratio averages, so therefore they are the safest company to invest in as far as not having to worry about losing a large chunk of your change. And they also have the highest return to shareholders. The only negative thing that I can find about Apple is that 47.06% of their supply chain comes from a single company. And in terms of risk, this is a very risky investment, because if this one supplier were to go out of business, basically half of their business would be in shambles. So very risky, but they're still a very large and profitable company. My second industry that I chose to research was the aerospace and defense industry. It's actually one of my favorite industries as a whole. And the 5 companies that I chose to research were United Technologies Corporation, Boeing Corporation, Lockheed Martin Corporation, General Dynamics Corporation, and Raytheon. Okay, so first we have United Technologies Corporation. It researches, develops, and manufactures high technology products in numerous areas, including aircraft engines, helicopters, HVAC, fuel cells, elevators and escalators, fire and security, building systems, and industrial products, among others. So they pretty much do it all. They have a pretty high current ratio at 1.3, quick ratio is 0.72, and the cash ratio is 0.23. The ROE is below the industry average at 19.81, and the price to earnings ratio is below industry average at 14.24. However, that's because Boeing and Lockheed Martin have ridiculously high ratios for those two, so it really bumps up the averages. So still pretty good averages for ROE and PE. They're very profitable companies. They're able to pay their creditors and add value to any portfolio. Next we have Boeing. They design, manufacture, and sell airplanes, rotorcraft, rockets, and satellites. It also provides leasing and product support services. One of the largest companies in the world, actually. They have a current ratio of 1.2, quick ratio of 0.37, and a cash ratio of 0.23. Their ROE is very high at 51.48. Their price to earnings ratio is a little bit lower than the industry average at 19.6. But obviously, with the return on equity, it's a very valuable company, very safe company to invest in if you're looking for a higher return per dollar invested. Next, we have Lockheed Martin, which is probably my second favorite stock period behind Apple. They're an aerospace, defense, security, and advanced technologies company with worldwide interests. Like I said, they pretty much do anything that involves military type stuff. They design airplanes, satellites, the little shuttle shells that go around the rockets that fall off whenever they go into orbit. The current ratio is 1.11, quick ratio is 0.66, the cash ratio is 0.13. The ROE is actually the highest I've ever seen for a single company at 98.59, and the P ratio is pretty high as well at 17.86. So they are a very, very, very valuable company in terms of return on your investment. Next we have General Dynamics Corporation. They are an American aerospace and defense company, pretty much one of the world's largest military contractors. They have pretty high current ratio at 1.27. Their quick ratio is 0.61, cash ratio is 0.32. The return on equity is a little bit lower than the industry average at 22.16, and the price to earnings is a little bit higher than industry average at 18.16. They are a very safe company to invest in terms of return on your equity and not having to invest as much per dollar of earnings as some of these other companies. And then we have Raytheon. They are a major American defense contractor and industrial corporation with core manufacturing concentrations in weapons, military, and commercial electronics. Their current ratio is pretty high for this industry at 1.74. Their quick ratio and cash ratio actually are the same number at 0.8 for each. Their ROE is 19.61, and their price to earnings ratio is 14.90. They're a very profitable company. They can pay their creditors, and they do add value to any portfolio. So for this industry, for the averages for current ratio, we have 1.32. For a quick ratio, we have 0.63. Cash ratio, we have 0.34. And return on equity, 42.33. And this is mainly because of Boeing and Lockheed Martin having such ridiculously high numbers. And then for price to earnings, it's pretty average with other industries at 16.95. So as an entire industry, it's a very profitable industry. Most of the companies in it are able to pay their creditors. All the companies that I researched were able to pay their creditors, and it's a very valuable industry to invest in. Okay, so my favorite company, as stated, was Lockheed Martin from this sector. They have really high return on equity, which, like I said before, that's the single most important ratio to look at, because the entire goal of management is to maximize your shareholder wealth, and that's what this ratio shows, is how much return on equity you're getting for your investment. So they have a pretty average price to earnings ratio for this industry. So that means for the dollars you're investing, you're getting back a much higher return on that equity. So it's a little bit better than the other four companies. They're able to pay their creditors and offer investors a great earnings per share. And as of 3 days ago, this company acquired Sikorsky Aircraft from United Technologies in a deal valued at $9 billion. So this is only going to increase their bottom line. I'm not necessarily saying it's going to increase all these ratios, but it's definitely going to increase their cash flows, which gives them more room to invest in other ventures, which is only going to help the company in the future. So this next part, we had to compare our favorite company from each sector. And these are actually my two companies, period, in any sector. For Apple, the current ratio is 1.08 compared to Lockheed Martin's at 1.11, so it was a little bit lower, but relatively even. The cash ratio was 0.4 compared to the quick ratio. The cash ratio of Lockheed Martin at 0.13, so a good bit higher than Lockheed Martin's cash ratio. However, their quick ratio was almost dead even. Apple has a quick ratio of 0.67, whereas Lockheed Martin has a quick ratio of 0.66. And this is pretty much where Lockheed Martin leaves Apple in the dust. Their return on equity is 98.59 compared to Apple's at 38.37. However, Apple, this is still a relatively high ROE for most companies. I mean, most companies float around the 10 to 20 range. The PE for Apple was slightly less than Lockheed Martin's, but not that much of a deal breaker in my opinion, because these stock prices are pretty much, they usually float around $20 apart. The price to earnings for Apple was 16.31 compared to Lockheed Martin's at 17.86. So both companies are very profitable. They're able to pay their creditors. They're able to offer their shareholders a good bit of wealth and add value to portfolios. So in conclusion, Apple and Lockheed Martin are relatively similar in terms of liquidity ratios. I feel that with Apple being the largest company in the world, though, and given that the fact that they constantly release new products, technologies, and innovations, they should have better numbers than what they're posting. And once we look beyond liquidity ratios, Lockheed Martin's leaps and bounds ahead of Apple in terms of performance, especially with their ROE, which is, like I said, is the most important thing to look at. Also, given the new deal in which Lockheed Martin acquired Sikorsky Aircraft from United Technologies, they will only increase their revenues and thus improve upon their already stellar numbers. So personally, I would invest in Lockheed Martin and predict that they will have a price per share of $217.50 given their current growth and dividend payout 1 year from now. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.